I've heard so much about Chandigarh over the years, and now to be here is a real pleasure. Thank you very much, Tanya Aman, for inviting me, TED and PEC. मैं आज आपको अपनी पड़ोसी के बारे में आपको बताना चाहता हूँ. This Akash was talking a lot about. I know, Chandigarh is the capital of the Punjab. I wonder actually how many of you thought. I don't know how many. I'm sure Chandigarh is a national university. I don't know what's the proportion of Punjabis that you actually have here. But who are the western neighbor of the Punjabis? I'm not talking about the western neighbor of India now. I'm talking about the western neighbor of the Punjabis. Well, the western neighbor of the Punjabis, probably you do know, are the Pashtuns. They speak Pashto. This is the language of Pashto. It's just like, it's quite different actually from Punjabi. But, so I've learned it over the last 4 to 5 years, just like I learned, Hindi. Unfortunately, I didn't learn Punjabi. But, these are the people, and I know they have a good reputation, it's in India, because, I get mistaken for actually a Pashtun when I'm walking around the streets of Delhi, and people say to me, Khan Sahab, they say, wo Sardaji bolte hain, to isi tarah hum log unko wo Khan Sahab bolte hain. So actually you're at an advantage, in India, because the Khansabs, the Pashtuns who you've had exposure to, are people who really actually are adhering, as far as I can see, to the true values of what it means to be a Pashtun. So, I can give you an example of probably the most famous Pashtun in the whole of India, if it works, my rather simple technology. Actually, I'm not very familiar. So, ये आपको मालूम है कि ये बादशाह खान है, ये ना खान अब्दुल गफ्फार खान है. ये आप लोग उनको फ्रंटियर गांधी बोलते हैं, हम उनको बादशाह खान बोलते हैं. उनका असली नाम खान अब्दुल गफ्फार खान. So he was the colleague and brother in arms, or so to speak, of Mahatma Gandhi, and and he really came to the philosophy of non-violence actually completely independently of Mahatma Gandhi, and the story, how you might say, how did he get the name Bacha Khan? There's a lot of people ask me, how did he get that name Bacha Khan? Well, the Pashtuns were very simple people, and and they didn't know about meetings like this sort of meeting. They never had a meeting in their lives. So Bacha Khan wanted to reform them, to improve their lives, to improve their education, to give them a better existence. So he said to them, look, let's have a meeting, to his the villagers who lived around about where he lives near Peshawar. His home village is called Utmanzay. So they said, okay, we'll have a meeting. And then he said, now we have a meeting, so someone has to be in charge of this meeting, like Tanya's in charge of this meeting. Someone has to be in charge of a meeting, unless there'll be anarchy. Someone has to tell us, stop talking now. So then they said, well, you call the meeting, so you be the leader of the meeting, you be the chairman of the meeting. So he said, okay. And then he said, well, and then they didn't know about meetings, and they didn't know about chairman of meetings. So they said, oh, he must be king. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan must be king. And that's how he became Bacha Khan. So this was, the story. So this is, nowadays you have exposure to different types of Pashtuns. Shah Rukh Khan, वो भी पश्तून है. वो जब शाहिद अफरीदी पिछले साल आए थे नहीं, तो हमने YouTube में देखा है कि Shah Rukh Khan and this Shahid Afridi were sitting together, and Shah Rukh Khan said, मैं तो भी पठान हूँ. और मेरा अबू पेशावर का था। और जब पाकिस्तान जीत जाता है तो मेरा अबू खुश हो जाता है, और जब मेरा वो हिंदुस्तान जीत जाता है क्रिकेट में तो मेरा अम्मी खुश हो जाती है क्योंकि वो दिल्ली के हैं. So he was, talking in a sort of light-hearted way. So, I mean, I think Shahid Afridi, when he came to Mohali last year, gave quite a good account of himself and was quite gracious and generous in defeat. That was my impression anyway. So, these are the type of people who actually, you have access and you have exposure to actually quite good Pashtuns. So when I came to this part of the world in 45 years ago, nearly 45 years ago now, we had access to this, we had exposure to this type of good quality of the Pashtuns. And I've got a picture here. This is a lady, actually, she's from Italy. Actually, to tell you the truth, we were hippies, in the late 60s. So, we were, actually, and in those days there was quite a lot of freedom. There weren't the sort of very great restrictions that you have nowadays with visas and stuff. So, हम लोग इस तरह नहीं just यहाँ तो गर्मी हम यहाँ गुजारते थे, उसमें स्वात में, चित्राल में, और फिर कुछ लोग तो फिर वो सर्दी गुजारने के लिए गोवा आया करते थे. So that was a sort of lifestyle, that nomadic, hippie nomadic lifestyle. So we were attracted to these, to these qualities that I mentioned, the qualities of the villagers of Bacha Khan. It was generosity of spirit, big-heartedness, bravery was also there, but great hospitality, And in fact, the more poor people were, the more hospitable they were, because they were keen to sort of, they shouldn't get the idea that, we're poor and we can't be hospitable to them. So this was the sort of spirit which attracted. So it attracted me so much. ये जो उनका नाम है नहीं, ये जो पहले मुझे पता नहीं कि उनका नाम क्या था, वो अभी आयशा है. अभी उनका नाम बस आयशा है. वहाँ उनकी बच्ची जो है वो वहाँ पैदा हो गई. ये स्वात है, ये पठानों की एक बहुत खूबसूरत वादी है, जैसे आपका कश्मीर है, दराए स्वात, वो वादी कश्मीर की तरह है बिल्कुल. So she's still actually, she's refreshing her Pashto, because I've been one of the lucky ones who sort of stayed here, either in that part of the world or in Afghanistan or in India. Really, ever since, I've been one of the few survivors, so to speak. So, I'm actually sort of now using the internet and Skype to refresh and replenish her knowledge of Pashto. So, after the settling in that part of the world, then so she was saying to me the other day, actually, Aisha, she said, where were you in the 70s? Weren't you in in SWAT? I said, well, I was in SWAT to start off with, but then मैं तो तालिब बन गया था. I became a student of religion, and that's what, that the word talib actually means a student of religion. That's what it means, a student of truth, someone who is seeking truth through knowledge. So I studied in these madrasas, and I was there for 15 years. And that's what brought me to India in 1978 to study, because, as many of you may know, the Mecca of Islamic study is Darul Uloom Deoband in your eastern neighborly province of UP. So it's very close, actually. I realized coming in the train today that, Ambala, to Saharanpur hai, to bilkul paas hi Deoband hai. So then we studied there. That's where I completed my Islamic education. Now it's actually relevant to what I'm going to get to. But when I came to India, first of all, I didn't have any money, but I did have the facility that I could travel between Delhi and Peshawar as a British citizen quite freely. So I was doing business, absolutely legal, I must stress. Well, certainly not sort of contraband, but attar, Islamic books, that sort of thing, and watches and things like that, which were cheaper in that part of the world, bring them here. This type of, mufflers were very popular in those days. I remember one day I stood in the streets of Amritsar and I sold mufflers. I had a whole, bundle of mufflers from Peshawar, which I bought from Peshawar, Japanese ones. And they sold just like hotcakes. And, really quickly, you had to stand in the streets. And then I used to take, pan I used to take actually from India. And that's, really quite profitable actually. But, because, they love pan, but they can't get it in Lahore. So I just used to take it to Lahore and Anarkali mein to bahut jaldi bik jata tha. So anyway, that's my entrepreneurship. So this, this is how I used to support myself as a student in Deoband. So my ustaz, they used to say to me, Jan Mohammed, my Islamic name is Jan Mohammed, how do you support yourself? And I say, well, I'm doing this, business. I'm tijarat karta hu. So they said, ye bahut achhi baat hai. They said, bahut achhi baat hai. And this, they said, this is, So what I'm getting at here is, Islamic scholar to do to have a business is a good idea. And, it's actually encouraged. And that's what I was actually, one of my first impressions when I was studying Islam, was that all of my teachers, they didn't make a living out of teaching. They actually made a living, some other way. I had a teacher in the frontier who was a hakim. And that's a very popular, actually, occupation for Islamic scholars. And, a lot of people go from Deoband and study in Jamia Hamdard and in Aligarh Tibia College, and they become hakim. So that's a very, so the medical profession is very suitable for them. Business is, of course, very suitable. The way Islam spread to the four corners, well, not four corners, but, far and wide, was through, businessmen, people doing business. And, by their very scrupulous type of standards, their honesty, their integrity, their generosity, well, then obviously they used to, have an effect on people as well. So this is, doing a business, doing some, having some business, having some profession. So, and then my, so okay, then I studied for 6 years. I completed my Islamic studies in Deoband. And then I became an apprentice with an Islamic scholar. Many of you might have heard of him, Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. He's quite well known and well renowned in India. And I became apprentice with him in Delhi. So this was how I adopted the profession of being a media professional. And I learned, the sort of brand of traditional media, which I try and sort of promote and try and teach nowadays, is very much, I owe that to Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, because, he used to take some sort of event and look at some sort of event, but then add something, not just do the why, where, what, who, wherefore, this, the sort of mundane side of journalism, but also what can we learn from this? What does it teach us in order to improve our lives and to improve the lives of our community? So that was, so I became, as I say, a media professional. So now we've got here I've mentioned 3 professions really: medicine, and I've mentioned business, and I've mentioned the media, which are particularly really suitable for Islamic scholars. And so for me, I've given you a sort of very summary of my experiences. It was an absolutely natural thing for someone who was a student of religion to become a businessman, for someone who is an Islamic scholar to become a hakim, for someone who's studied Islam and become an Islamic scholar to then turn to the media as a profession. And then, as Tanya mentioned earlier, I joined the BBC in the early 90s after leaving Darul Uloom Deoband and doing my apprenticeship with Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. within 10 years, I'd become quite a senior manager with the BBC. And I was asked by the BBC then to go back to Peshawar. I was with the BBC in London at that time, just in 91 and 92, and to set up an Afghan soap opera. So actually, in 1998, the Queen came to Islamabad, and she was in the British High Commission's residence there. She said to me, "What do you do?" I said, well, I run a soap opera for Afghans, if you can understand that, ma'am. She said, "No, I can't understand that. What are you talking about, a soap opera for Afghans?" I said, "Well, we're trying to sort of explain to Afghans how they can improve their lives through stories, through traditional storytelling. But we sort of formulate this storytelling through the methodology of soap opera." So she said, and then she was quite impressed. She thought, "Have you heard what the BBC is doing in Peshawar?" She was going to tell. So, this was what we were doing. We were telling stories which could help people to improve their lives in Afghanistan. It was called Khana Nau Zindagi Nau, New Home, New Life. So that was, storytelling. That's another side. So what I'm getting, is it's a very natural thing for someone who has studied Islam to have a profession and to be a media professional, to be a businessman, to be a doctor or a hakim, or even to be an engineer, but I just haven't got enough expertise in that field to be able to see the sort of link. But I'm sure there's also a link there, and certainly between architecture, because a lot of the modern architecture, I know this from sort of people I've met from the Royal Society of Architects and things like that. They've told me how much the design of places like Oxford and Cambridge owes to the design of madrasas in the Middle Age, particularly in places like Andalusia and in Uzbekistan and in places like that. So I'm sure in architecture that's another very suitable field. But now what I've found in Afghanistan is that this sort of link between the madrasa and the mainstream has been cut. And that's actually one of the big problems. I mean, you hear here, or we hear, the world hears, about the problems in Afghanistan. But this is actually one of the big problems, that they don't have a livelihood. They don't have any other way to make their income except to go to the mosque or go to the madrasa, and then there aren't enough mosques and madrasas to go around to all those mullahs. And then, then what do they do? And, and then, of course, then you've got nothing to do, and you've got no livelihood, and then you've got a whole atmosphere and culture of sort of radicalization and violence and conflict, which has been growing over the last 30 years. Then, of course, it's a very dangerous mixture, and the whole world knows about the effects, but what I'm talking about now is really the underlying causes of it all. So, now they haven't got, they don't know about, become a businessman, become a media professional. And, it's a concept. It was very natural to me, but it's a concept which was it's very strange to them nowadays. And, I've had people come up to me, I've been sending up, if I can find that picture. Yeah, this is the right one, actually. It's a bit of the luck of the draw, these pictures. I don't know how the right ones are coming up, actually. Yeah. It was the right one. Anyway, so there was one, we teach media studies in madrasas in Afghanistan and in our own Islamic Vocational Academy. It's called a Higher Learning Institute for madrasa graduates in Afghanistan, in which we impart to them, expertise in these professions that I've been talking about. And then, and they come up to me and they say, media ke saath madrasa walon ka kya taluk hai? They say, what has a madrasa student got to do with media? And I said, well, I went from a madrasa to a media, so why can't they? And this is actually me teaching in one of the madrasas in Afghanistan. Ye abhi khud ba khud chal raha hai. I didn't ask it to do that. Uski apna damag hai bas. So this is what we're trying to do in Afghanistan, and trying to sort of give an underlying, to sort of improve their livelihood, to broaden their horizons, to give them a range of options as far as what they can do in life, give them confidence. You can actually contribute. Your madrasa education is a good thing. It's a good thing. It gives you good character. It gives you good integrity. It gives you good moral standards. But you can contribute in the modern world a lot, and so to give them that confidence, that they don't have to feel on the back foot, but they feel that they can contribute to their nation, to the community, and to humanity. So actually, I come back, actually it's actually something in which, I'm hoping, I was saying to one of my colleagues earlier that I'm hoping to set up, a center for this here in India, because this is the place that it can be done. Because here, I'm sure in many universities, even JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, has a policy of equivalence towards madrasas. So they accept madrasa students into Jawaharlal Nehru University. If you go to Jawaharlal Nehru University, there's a lot of madrasa students there. In Afghanistan, they don't have that opportunity, that they can't go to university. They're like ghettoized and marginalized with absolutely disastrous effects. So here we have that opportunity to sort of create a link between the madrasa and the mainstream. And so, I'm feeling that very much that this is really the place, that India is the place, that one can, that both are very strong. The madrasa system is very strong, and of course the mainstream educational system is very strong. So, this is the place where very, constructive linkage can be created, has in fact already been created. But in fact, obviously I want, Afghan students and Afghanistan to be able to benefit from this. And actually, this sort of, I'm talking now about this sort of the mainstream education and the madrasa education. Well, another reason that actually this division actually happened originally in India. Because, here there was the Aligarh school and the Deoband school. So in the time of the British, that of course there was Sayyid Ahmad Khan in the Aligarh school who said, we should progress in scientific education and in modern education. And that's the way we're going to get on in life. And obviously the Deoband attitude was more sort of reactionary and more traditional and different. But so this was where, but the division hasn't reached the level, thank God, that it has in other places, particularly in Afghanistan. And they still, these two schools of thought, these two approaches still see eye to eye, and still as the fact, that myself, a product of a madrasa, and I'm teaching here in the university, I'm lecturing here, I'm giving a talk here in the University of Technology. This bears witness to the fact that, there is a good, there is a good ambience between the two systems of education. So I'd like to leave it there for now, and thank you very much for listening to me. It's been a pleasure to be here.